Welcome back to the news at 10. Let's cross over to Abuja now. Here's Markwe. Markwe.
Hello, Ijoma. Now, while the health workers have just begun their strike, the non-teaching staff of Nigerian universities have suspended theirs after sealing a new deal with the federal government. After 8 hours of negotiations, the university workers and the government team agreed to resolve the disputed issues affecting the unions. The national president of the Joint Action Committee of the three unions, Mr. Sam Ugokwe, says the industrial action has been suspended for a month to allow government to meet their demands.
This meeting is the third in the series of conciliation meetings with the striking non-teaching staff of universities since they started their strike 2 weeks ago.
And based on this conclusion,
leading the federal government team is the Minister of Labour and Employment as they deliberate over the 12 reasons why the workers are on strike. The striking workers are protesting, among other issues, the non-payment of salary arrears, as well as the non-implementation of court judgments delivered in their favor. After 8 hours of deliberations, which lasted into the early hours of Thursday, September the 21st, both the striking workers and the federal government team finally reached an agreement.
We agreed that the Joint Action Committee leadership will consult its organ as quickly as possible, urgently, with a view to calling off this strike as soon as possible.
And finally, we have this endorsed by all of us, three-page agreement signed by all of us.
With this agreement signed, the striking workers now move to their secretariat, where they announced the suspension of the strike.
We have developed an actionable template with specific time frames to implement salient aspects of the agreement. Based on the foregoing and following exhaustive and extensive consultations with our various union organs, we hereby announce the suspension of the strike action embarked upon by the Joint Action Committee of NAT, NASU, and SAN, on the understanding that the timelines agreed with the federal government of Nigeria on the various issues are met.
For now, full academic and non-academic activities have been restored in government-owned universities that were affected by the strike. How long this will last depends largely on the implementation of the agreements that have been signed.
Now to mainstream politics, the Ekiti State governorship election might be roughly a year away, but this has not stopped the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, from sounding a note of warning. The electoral umpire is asking political parties to play by the rules. While meeting with party representatives in Ado-Ekiti, the state capital, the INEC resident electoral commissioner in the state, Professor Abdulganiyu Raji, assured them of a level playing field in the exercise. And November 1, the deadline for the enforcement of the prohibition of open grazing in Benue State is around the corner. However, herdsmen are yet to begin the process of acquiring land for the purpose of ranching. While the herdsmen are requesting for an extension in order to adequately enlighten their members, traditional rulers in the state insist on the November deadline as the only solution to already strained relations. Our big story tonight takes a look at the compliance level with the ranching ultimatum ahead of the November 1 deadline.
Is the difference? Nothing tastes like my Indomie.
For the last 6 years, an estimated 3,000 people have been killed in attacks by herdsmen on farming communities in Benue State. Perhaps the deadliest of the attacks was recorded from February the 19th, 2016, when Fulani herdsmen from Nasarawa State crossed the river Benue and began a 6-week-long rampage through Agatu local council, leaving death and destruction in their wake. 1 year after, the Open Grazing Prohibition and Ranches Establishment Law was passed, with a November 2017 deadline to criminalize open grazing. But how well are cattle herders in the state complying with the law ahead of the deadline?
Even within the village here, I've had problems with my neighbor brothers and sisters here on the farm. So if within a small community like Igbo here, I've had problems of my cattle going into other people's farm. On a wider society where the cattle herdsmen from the Fulanis intrude into farmers' lands, that shows that it will affect them the more. And if daggers are drawn, blood will be shed, people will be killed.
Converting expired car tires to ranch building materials is one of the innovations introduced by the indigenous cattle herder. A model example for rearing cattle in the 21st century is provided by Governor Samuel Otom's own Oracle farm.
Ranching has many advantages. Why, you see, when you expose the animal too much, moving from place to place, many kilometers, the energy, the weight of the animals is reduced. There's some of them, you see them, they are macheted. But when they are on ranching or this intensive system, you provide everything you need for them. So that is what we are doing here. And we are showing the whole world that ranching is possible. You can do it. As you see, we are doing it. We have different units. From here, you go to another unit. So ranching is the only way. You can see we don't have problem of herdsmen versus farmers again.
At the large cattle market in Makodi, the owners asked the Benue State government to relax the law to accommodate those who cannot afford to buy land for ranching. However, the state governor assures this category of herders of plans to build 3 ranches as clusters for their businesses.
It will be okay. The 3 central zone should have a big ranches which the farmers will be away from the ranches of where the animal will be kept. It will be good.
While the traditional rulers at this joint stakeholders meeting insist on the November deadline for ending open grazing, the Fulani leadership, however, is requesting for an extension of time.
The information, the statement that the anti-grazing law, we quietly understood with it and we accepted it. It is the best way to handle this issue, problem of farmers and herdsmen. But we need time. Sensitization is the best. For the Fulani to know what it actually means, there is need for the government to give us a little time and to give us a support.
So far, while the local herders have been complying, it appears no Fulani herdsman has begun the process of acquiring land for ranching. This may just be, well, another potential conflict brewing as the dry season approaches, when the herdsmen migrate to the Benue Valley for grazing.
Taste is the difference. Nothing tastes like my Indomie.
Now, recovery is still rather fragile at the Nigerian stock market after a day of profit taking. And Nwawodo has details of this and more on Business News. Please stay with us.
You first. First Bank.
Thank you, Maokwe, and welcome to Business News. The Auditor General of the Federation, Mr. Anthony Ayine, is canvassing the independence of the organization to allow for transparency and accountability. And for the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, this will go a long way in achieving the federal government's anti-corruption war.
Some may wonder why this issue of independence is so key. In the context of Nigeria and the major challenges we have, including corruption, the effectiveness of the audit office is hindered or weakened when the Supreme Audit Institution cannot be guaranteed of minimum or essential funding to meet basic needs to execute its mandate, where the system you are auditing exerts direct control over your funding, both in terms of what you get and when it is released to you. In some instances also, the auditee has to financially sponsor audit field visit due to the audit office having inadequate funds, you can well imagine the impact that will have on the effectiveness of audit and indeed on the auditors over time.
One of the key priorities of this administration, which is about building the future for Nigeria, is anti-corruption. But beyond anti-corruption, we must build institutions, and that is really where the role of the Auditor General comes in. And it's very, very important that we have audit independence, as has been said time and time again. The independence of the auditor is the first ingredient in his or her effectiveness, and therefore we support the audit law and the amendments that will make the Auditor General financially independent.
Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun. The Central Bank of Nigeria has sold 205 billion naira in treasury bills to mop up liquidity 1 day after raising more money than it planned through a debt auction. 6 open market bills have been sold at 17.9% compared with 16.8% it paid to place the same maturity at an auction on Wednesday. The CBN's Monetary Policy Committee will hold its interest rates decision meeting on Tuesday next week, and most analysts are expecting it to leave the benchmark unchanged at 14%. It's all red for the Nigerian Stock Exchange today after a brief recovery yesterday on profit taking in key blue-chip equities. However, traders and analysts are expecting bargain hunting to drive a positive close in tomorrow's session. Let's hear more from Bisi Adebayo.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. Sell-offs resumed today at the local stock markets as investors wasted no time to reap the profits earlier recorded in Wednesday's trading session, particularly from stocks in the oil and gas and the industrial sector. The activity pulled back the market's total value by 6 billion naira, while the all-share index reacted with a 0.05% decline a day after climbing back to the 35,000 level. On the other hand, the 25 gainers led by Nemeth, NEM Insurance and FBN Holdings outweighed 20 losers led by ICO Group, Champion Breweries and Caverton. GT Bank, Access and Jaiz Bank were the 3 major contributors to a more robust total turnover of 429.22 million units of shares worth over 8.6 billion naira from 3,271 transactions. And that's it on the Stock Market Reports. I am Bisi Adebayo.
Well, the color red also spread across board today for U.S. stock markets for the first time in 10 days. But let's see how the rest of the markets around the world fared at the close of business today. That's Business News Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawado. It's back to you, Joma.
You first. First Bank.
Thanks a lot, Anne. Still ahead on the news at 10, Super Eagles of Nigeria qualify for the final of the 2017 Waffle Cup with a 1-0 win over Benin Republic. That's on sports. Please stay with us.